Hello, and thank you for joining us today in our study of the book of Psalms. Today we're in Psalm 114. Now, this is a very short psalm. It's only about 8 verses in length, and it has one particular message or one particular theme to it. So, we're going to go through and read it this morning. But we're also going to, instead of breaking it down into several different lessons, we're just going to examine the singular lesson that it affords within it and see what the proclamation is of the power of God. Let's look at Psalm 114. Beginning in verse 1, we read, When Israel went out of Egypt, the house of Jacob from a people of strange language, Judah became his sanctuary, and Israel his dominion. The sea saw it and fled. Jordan turned back. The mountains skipped like rams, the little hills like lambs. What ails you, O sea, that you fled? O Jordan, that you turned back? The mountains that you skipped like rams? O little hills like lambs? Tremble, O earth, at the presence of the Lord, at the presence of the God of Jacob, who turned the rock into a pool of water, the flint into the fountains of water. As you look at Psalm 114, you have in this psalm a message concerning the power of God and specifically over nature. This psalm is going to make several references back to the days of the children of Israel coming out of the land of Egypt. As a matter of fact, it sets it in that particular setting in verse 1 when Israel went out of Egypt, the house of Jacob, from a people of strange language. And so, as they come out, there's going to be three different occurrences that are going to be explicitly discussed in this particular chapter. You have, first of all, the sea that saw it and fled in verse 2. This is the crossing of the Red Sea from Exodus chapter 14. And so you have here reference to the children of Israel crossing the Red Sea, where they then reach their escape from Egyptian captivity, their full and complete escape, by means of the sea then crashing over Pharaoh and his army. Then the second thing that you have in the same verse is the Jordan turned back. And this idea of the Jordan turning back is going to be the children of Israel crossing the Jordan River in Joshua chapter 3. This will be some 40 years later when these events are going to take place because the second generation of Israelites is the one that is actually going to enter into the land of Canaan. And so you have the statements concerning Jordan turning back or being blocked up is in many ways what it winds up being in order to allow them to pass through. And then you have the statements concerning the mountains skipped like rams, the little lambs or the little hills like lambs, and you have the impact of God upon nature in that way. But finally, you have down in verse number 7, or verse number 8 rather, back in verse 7, he says, Tremble, O earth, at the presence of the Lord, at the presence of the God of Jacob, who turned the rock into a pool of water, verse 8, the flint into a fountain of waters. Here you have reference back again to Exodus, where God is going to bring water forth from the rock in Exodus chapter 17. And he's going to do it again in the book of Numbers, though that's going to be a far more difficult situation because of the actions of Moses. So within this psalm, you have not a focus on man that is going to come out of the words of this psalm, but rather God's power over nature and how he utilizes nature in order to be able to fulfill his will for the children of Israel, in order to free them, in order to feed them, and in order to provide for them. And so you have this sentiment of a reminder for us that God controls and God is the one who is in charge, not just of the nations of the world, not just of the things of this world, but of the world itself, of the nature that surrounds us, and that He has the ability to move things to His will. And that's the message of Psalm 114. So I hope that these things have been beneficial to you. Next time we'll come back and we'll begin looking at Psalm 115. Thank you for viewing the video today, and I hope that you'll come back next time as we continue our study through the book of Psalms. But until then, have a great day.